Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to Insights in the Parsha of the Week, Parshat Vayakhel. I have to admit, last week's Parsha Insight was really amazing, incredible, even for me. And Baruch Hashem, I see in this week's Parsha there is a follow-up to last week's Insight, Bezat Hashem. So we'll continue with it based on this week's Parsha. But first, an introduction is needed on the concept Rabbi Nachman opens up in Likutey Moharan Lesson 24 of the concept of the Keter. The Keter, like we explained many times already, is like a wall separating Hashem's infinite light from the rest of creation. And it's needed because mankind would disappear if they would reunite with that infinite light. Because again, man is finite, the creation is finite, and Hashem is infinite, infinite, if you want to say. So two opposites. And if creation, mankind, the pinnacle of creation, would reconnect to the infinite light, it would disappear. And yet Hashem wants mankind to exist with an enhancement of light and clarity coming from the infinite light. So the scenario that Rabbi Nachman explains of the Zohar, based on the Zohar, is that a person reaches the Keter spiritually. It's a mental, emotional, spiritual running accomplishment of reaching the Keter, and then the Keter bounces a person back. Okay? So in the bounce back, what's happening is a person is developing patience. Patience. He needs to wait until the mind is properly settled from this bounce back. And when the mind is finally settled, then it creates, the mind's situation creates these vessels which they themselves are above the comprehension of man. But yet these vessels that are created become vessels to fill into them infinite light, clarity that man needs. So the vessel is above his level, and the light filling the vessel is also above his level. But Rabbi Nachman teaches both happen when a person exercises patience. Okay? He says also another scenario, which in a way it's also an patience, but it's even more. It's where a person is bounced back so low, he goes down by the bounce from the Keter. He goes down to the lowest levels, which are called the exchanged chambers, the chamber of exchanges, where everything is distorted, everything is mixed up, good with evil, truth and falsehood, pure impurity, right, wrong, everything is mixed up. And from there, a person, if he holds on and doesn't give up and strengthens himself with simcha to start again, this also builds vessels for the infinite light also. But the preferred scenario is that a person is pushed back and has just patience. Now, to connect these ideas with last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha, the whole test that we mentioned last week of the evil one fooling the Jews that Moshe Rabbeinu died in order to get them to fall into the trap of making the golden calf. Their test then was the initial test, the first test of patience. They were expected to wait, to listen to Aaron, to listen to Hur, to listen to the tribe of Levi, to listen to their wives, and not to succumb to making an idol because of the despair and the worrying. Oh my God, where's Moshe Rabbeinu? What are we supposed to do? Patience. And there was no patience. Okay? That was their test. Their test was not to give in. However, they actually fell into the sin of the golden calf. Okay? So since that's already happened, since now there's in our historical record, our history, we have the sin of the golden calf there, which is considered a major blemish of the patience. What it means is that from now on, from that point on of the sin of the golden calf until Mashiach comes, the main way Jewish people build vessels to receive infinite light, clarity, is specifically they are thrown all the way down to what we mentioned, the exchange chambers. The chamber of exchanges where everything is mixed up. This explains the crazy reality that we have today, that people feel the two opposites. They feel, one hand, they want to connect to Hashem and they want to do good and they try to do good and they do good, but they also do terrible things. I feel bad going into examples that you can have a big rabbi, a Torah scholar, he's finished all the Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, and yet he goes on the internet and he sees pornography. Chas v'shalom. It's a sad example, but it's common. Unfortunately, it happens that you have people like two opposites. Decide: are you in holiness or in holiness? If you're in purity, in purity. But no, today things are crazy mixed up. Crazy. People want to be good people. They want to do good, but they fall. Okay, and the falling, the Yitzhar tells them, "Ach, look at you. You think Hashem will accept you now? You, such a Torah scholar, so educated, everyone looks up to you, and then you go chas shalom fooling around with somebody else's wife, chas shalom." I'm just saying extreme crazy things that a normal person says, that person, he lost it. But unfortunately, these things are getting common, that more people, they're full of opposites. They're Zimri, the person does acts like Zimri, who did immorality, and yet the person expects reward like Pinchas for doing something holy. And we see people, I gave extreme examples, by the way, it doesn't have to be that chas shalom extreme, but people are broken because they can't believe that they do what they do after having such a revelation in light in life. And they feel bad. They feel guilty. They feel embarrassed. They say to themselves, look at you. You're worthless, they say to themselves. Look at you. Hashem is so kind to you. He gives you a family, a wife, kids, a house, Shabbat, Torah, mitzvot. You have so much good in your life. And you do that. You do off like, and the person says, he agrees. You're right, Yetzirah, you're right. And what happens? The person loses his aspiration to continue. What Rabbi Nachman's teaching in this lesson is so pertainable today, is that just because a person, God forbid, has two opposites, doesn't mean it's the end. Like other people tell him, chas v'shalom, or Yeshua telling him, it's finished. You're never gonna make it. Look at this. You're trying to do good, and yet your setbacks are so severe. So forget it. It doesn't apply. Rabbi Nachman's teaching just the opposite. The way to get to the Keter is to advance from such situations. Rabbi Nachman once said about himself, this is recorded in his book Likutey Moharan. He said to his followers, you guys see me, you look at me, and of course you guys see me as being an outstanding tzaddik, right? And I tell you that even someone like me, okay, as you guys hold of me, if I were to transgress the whole Torah, okay, I think he says there like 600 times or many times, nevertheless, I would still be a tzaddik afterwards. But the thing is, I would do tshuva. But I wouldn't lose my status of being a tzaddik because I would get up and continue. Not as if nothing happened. I'll do tshuva. I will do tshuva and start again. This dilemma, this frustration that we're going through, so common, is due to the blemish of the golden calf. Because the Jews didn't listen to their wives, because they didn't pick up the message that they have to accept the bounce, they're being bounced back, but they were nervous, especially the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav, no, we need a leader. Moshe Rabbeinu's dead. The Yetzirah made the image of the coffin of Moshe Rabbeinu floating in the air. We need a leader, we need to do something. And all the Jews went into a panic because of this. And the woman said, we're not giving you our earrings. Aaron said, go to the wives, get the earrings, okay? To remind you, first of all, the women are not going to give in because they're faithful. And their pushback to the men is to remind them, hey, this is the test of the Keter. And in the end, they didn't give it, and the men lost. So because we lost the test of achieving the light of the Keter, which was expected to come down with the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu was bringing down on the two tablets. The whole idea of Moshe Rabbeinu coming down on the 17th of Tammuz was to give the Torah in a format that the Jews, just with the attitude of patience, can tap into the infinite light. That was the idea. but they missed it. They ruined it. They missed it. They mixed it. They mixed it up. They messed it up. So now, because of that, throughout history, we are faced with scenarios of Jews who are so broken about themselves, especially now before Mashiach comes. Before now, we're expecting the final Keter to be revealed, B'ezrat Hashem, to be revealed. So our tests are so severe today. Okay? So now there's no other alternative that a person goes through crazy things and yet strengthens himself and starts again. In Breslov, they have an expression that a person in his ups and downs, in his struggles to serve Hashem, they say like this, Ober Malach, Ober Galach. That sometimes a person's like an angel. His davening is great. His learning is great. His serving Hashem is great. His simcha is great. Everything is just going amazing. So he's like an angel. And then, or the next day, or the next hour, he's a galach. A galach is like a priest. He falls so low, and he feels so shameful about himself. How could you do that? How could you do that after Hashem gave you such a big light? You do that? Come on. Malach, galach. And this is the scenario we are in because of submitting to the golden calf. So there's no other way, only this way. And this Rabbi Nachman teaches in lesson 24 that the only way to extract holiness and come back to the Keter is by going down first into the exchanged chambers, the chamber of exchanges, where everything is mixed up. From there, being besimcha, holding on and being strong, going up, and then expecting to be hit again and having to go back all the way down. But I learned a lesson that this is the strategy, this is part of the process of me advancing and coming up again, B'ezrat Hashem. So in this week's Parsha, which talks about the Jews now wanting to do tshuva for the golden calf, because Hashem accepted Moshe Rabbeinu's prayers, and he said the tshuva for the Jewish people is to now make a mishkan, with gold, just like there was gold donated to the golden calf, given to make the golden calf. Now the Jews have to prepare it, also by bringing other things, but especially gold. You can understand that the main material in the Mishkan and by extension in the Holy Temple was gold. Gold being one of the most precious of the items, more than silver, more than copper, more than all the materials, the wool and the dye, the skins, the leather skins, etc., and the wooden vessels and the wooden poles to make the walls. The most precious item is the gold. So the gold, especially of the Mishkan, was to atone for the gold of the golden calf. Those who really sinned were punished. The three types, like Rashi brought down in last week's Parsha. Those who had hatra'ah, were warned and did b'mezid, they were killed in one way. Those who had no warning but were killed in another way. And those, who had they didn't. In case of this, three cases of situations of people who were killed. But the leftover Jews were also punished because they didn't stand up against it. They were there witnessing it, and in a way, when you're silent, it's like acceptance. So we have to pay for that. And this is the building of the Mishkans in this week's Parsha. So let's take a look in this week's Parsha. But the Jews were eager to donate. So eager that the people designated to collect the materials, they told Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jews are bringing too much material. We have too much. We have more than we need. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay, announced everyone to stop bringing, and the Jews stopped bringing. But it says that on the day that they announced, okay, everyone start giving donations to build the Mishkan. So let's take a look at one of the verses here, okay? Let's look at the beginning of the paragraph and get to the verse. So it's Sheni, the second aliyah of the Parsha Vayakhel. We're chapter 35, verse 21. So it says, Vayavo kol ish asher nisa'o libo. So now we're talking about the actual donation, the donating happening. So each man whose heart was raised, whose heart lifted him, pushed him, convinced him to donate, because it's the heart that wants to give. When a person gives tzedakah and he's happy to give, it's coming from the heart. Most people, it's hard for them to give tzedakah, but here the Jews were so eager to atone the golden calf because of the damage that it caused until Mashiach comes. There's now damage that now patience is no longer the test. Rather, we have to go to the chamber of exchanges to fix now what the test of the Keter. So every man whose heart pushed him came, v'chol asher nadva rucho, and each person whose spirit wanted to give a nediva, like convinced him to give, heviu et trumat Hashem limlechet oil moed. They brought the donations, what they elevated to give. That's the actual truma means, to lift up and to give, to the truma for Hashem, for the work, for the sake of the work of the tent of meeting, and everything associated to the work of the tent of meeting, ulebigdei hakodesh, and to the holy garments of the Kohanim. And then it says, the next verse 22, look at this. Vayavo ha'anashim al hanashim. What a funny wording. What an interesting wording. And they came, the men on the woman. Men on the woman. Rashi says, don't take it literally. It means the men and the woman and the men next to them, their husbands, because they had to get permission from their husbands to give the following items. What did the women give with the consent of their husbands? Their personal jewelry. Vayavo hanashim anashim kol nediv lev heviu. Every person whose heart pushed them to donate brought. Chach vanezem. Chach is like a bracelet, a golden bracelets. Nezem can be nose rings, earrings. Tabaat, rings. V'chumaz. What a funny word. Chumaz. Okay, chumaz. What is this chumaz? Rashi says chumaz. Kli zahav. We have to be a bit explicit here, but this is Torah, because the message is unbelievable here. Chumaz, kli zahav hu, natun keneged oto makom leisha. This was a golden vessel, a golden ornament, which was placed in women in order to do wedlock, in order to prevent women from having relations with other men. It would be a type of golden ornament placed in the woman's reproductive organ, and it had the shape of the reproductive organ, okay? And the rabbis and the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, page 64a, Pirshu, they explain kumaz stands for, without the vav, it's written chaf mem zayin. We can read it without pronouncing the vav, so it's chumaz. That it stands for, the Gemara and the sages, they say, kan mekom zima. Here is the place of immorality, of zima, of doing, being chas v'shalom, sexually impure and sexually abusive, God forbid. This is the place of that, okay? So the woman brought all these instruments, all these types of jewelry, and the Torah goes out of its way to say even this item, which you would think, why the Torah are you telling us this? And furthermore, isn't it a disgrace to donate such an ornament for the Beit HaMikdash, for the Mishkan? Rings, jewelry which is exposed, necklaces, bracelets, rings, earrings, I can understand that. But now this one, which is so uncommon, number one, and number two, that the Torah is making mention of it, and you think about it, it's not embarrassing. Look later on in the Parsha, when it came to donating to make the kior. The kior was the water basin in the Mishkan, which was made of copper. So it says that the woman brought for the copper water basin marot hatzovot. Marot hatzovot means the mirrors of the woman. The mirrors that women would use to look at themselves. A normal woman, she looks in the mirror. She's allowed to, of course, to see that she looks presentable and pretty and nice, so she can look good for her husband and whatever. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi brings down there this is chapter 38, coming up in the Parsha, and in verse number 8, that Rashi says there that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to accept these mirrors. Because why? They're made for the Yetzer Hara. They're made for evil. It's to make a woman look pretty and beautiful to her husband, and to get him excited, sexually excited. So that's not something proper. And to use that for the water basins made of copper, so Moshe Rabbeinu refused. Hashem said to him, accept it. This is more important for me than anything else, because it's through these mirrors that the Jewish women in Egypt, when in the slavery, in the bondage, they used it to help their husbands who were suffering in the slavery, in the bondage of Egypt, and they were exhausted and drained and weak. The women would first dress themselves up beautiful, and then they would go to the fields where the husbands were working to make the straw and the bricks, whatever, getting the straw and making bricks for the pyramids of Paro, whatever. So they would bring them water and bread, and they would sit with the husbands to relax, washing their feet and everything. And they would take out these mirrors, and they would show their husband who's more prettier, me or you, and would get the husbands excited. They would have relations, and that's from that the Jewish people, the continuity of the Jewish kids came out. So Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, take these mirrors. For me, they're more important than anything else, because that's what allowed the continuity of Am Yisrael. So by here, Moshe Rabbeinu was disgusted, and Hashem told him to take it. And by the Chumaz, nothing is mentioned. It's okay. You would think even it's more problematic. The commentaries in Rashi and on the Gemara, that Rashi is quoting, they say because the Kumaz was melted afterwards and it was mixed in with other jewelry ornaments, so because of that, it wasn't such a problem. But when you think about it, it's not a strong answer, because the kumaz, the shape of the kumaz, when just receiving the donation of this ornament, just looking at it, reminds a person of where it's coming from, and that entices and excites a man improperly. So the question still here is, why the kumaz? So this explains what we mentioned earlier, that people today are tested big time. They tested especially when it comes to the area of the brit, of Pagama Brit, of sexual impurity. And it's specifically from these type of tests, which is the climax of the exchange chambers. The idea of sexual immorality is the biggest test in the chamber of exchanges, which we're going through today. From there, to come out and reconnect to Hashem, and from them to connect to the Keter. The word kumaz, this ornament, begins with the letter kaf, to show its connection to the Keter. There's a rule Rabbi Nachman brings from the Zohar in several places, in the Likutey Moharan Lesson number 6, for example, ein Keter below kaf, that because the word Keter begins with the letter kaf, so other words connected that start with the letter kaf are connected, like kavod. Here also, the kumaz is connected to the Keter, because it's to teach a person not to fall. Even if you've fallen to these areas of impurity, God forbid, and feeling low and immoral, even after all the goodness that Hashem has done for you, and you begin to feel so futile and so broken and so ashamed of yourself, or even if that hasn't happened, that a person is just so low and doesn't know how to come back to Hashem, especially if you've fallen in this area of impurity of the Brit, the thing is to realize that if I get up and start again, I have the greatest chances possible to connect to the Keter. What's it dependent upon me? That I get up and start again. If I don't get up, so I lost the point. I will never connect to the Keter. The Keter will access to me infinite light which is needed to help me to grow, to help me to get out of all the crazy things that I'm stuck in my life. To help me get out, I need that light of the Keter. But the Keter tests today, specifically falling solo. So on another point, we said in last week's class that on one hand, a wife, she's a receiver. She's under the husband, but the root of the soul of the wife is above the husband. Like the verse reads in Mishlei, Proverbs chapter 12, Eshet Chayil Ateret Bala. The woman of valor is the crown of her husband. Rav Nosson, he takes this verse and he shows that the verse is indicating that the woman's role in the marriage is the idea of the Keter, which means that when a husband is about to hit the wall of the Keter, so the woman has like these spiritual antennas, these Keter antennas, and she's the one to push the husband back. The main obstacles where a person is trying to grow spiritually, and Hashem sends the wife to give the pushback, okay? So in that sense, Rav Nosson writes, the woman is above the man because she's rooted in the Keter. He's going towards the Keter. Her soul root is above from the Keter. But at the same time, she's a recipient. She can be below and above. In the Parsha, this week's Parsha, it says, like we said in the opening of the verse 22, chapter 35, 22, we read, V'yavohu hana'ashim al hanashim, and the men came on the wives. Rashi said they came next to. But the literal wording is that the man came on the wives to show that it was rectified. That now the men are in the proper place where the wife is below. Al hanashim. The men came over the wives to show that now the Keter was being rectified. Normally, when the Keter test takes place, the wife is above the husband. But now, when there's a correction, which was the case now that the Jews were donating gold, all the money, all the expenses and donations and jewelry towards the Mishkan, Okay, so that is now rectifying, cause rectification for the sin of the golden calf, allowing for the keter now to shine. So in this case, the women were in their place, the proper place, which is to be below the husbands. So it says ha'anashim, to be receivers, in other words, not below chas v'shalom. We respect the wives, but the idea is that they're now receivers. And in this case, when the women were giving their jewelry with the consent of the husband, that was the greatest expression of a man being on top of the wife, where he's okay for the wife to give the jewelry that he paid so much to get to give to her, and she's using it now for the temple. Amazing, bravo. So now that's hanashim al hanashim. So we see in the parsha that it was fixed. What comes out on a practical level is also the Torah is talking about the power of tzedakah. The power of tzedakah, Rav Nosson writes this also. The power of tzedakah is one of the greatest ways to come out of the chamber of exchanges, especially when a person gives tzedakah to the tzaddik. The Zohar says, to explain this idea, Ezu tzaddik. The Zohar says, what is the definition of a tzaddik? We have in Pirkei Avot, Ezu Asher, Ezu Gibor. Who is a wealthy man? Who is a warrior? Right? The Zohar adds another one. Who is a tzaddik? Someone, manden atar brit. Someone who guards the covenant. Okay? Rav Nosson points out that the word for tzedakah is similar to the root of the word tzaddik, indicating that the ideal place of giving tzedakah are to the tzaddikim. Why? Simple reason why. Because these tzaddikim have mastered the covenant. By you giving your charity, your blood money to them, you're connecting to their holiness. So no matter how low a person has fallen, if he also works, if he tries to give also tzedakah to the tzaddikim, this is one of the greatest ways out. The tzedakah to the Mishkan was considered tzedakah to Moshe Rabbeinu, really, because Moshe Rabbeinu, the place where he received his prophecies for all Am Yisrael, the main place was in Ohel Moed. Hashem made a place of meeting that from once the Mishkan was established, the one place now that Moshe Rabbeinu receives prophecy was when he entered the tent of meeting. That's why it's called the tent of meeting, between the divine presence of Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's where he received the prophecy to give to all of Am Yisrael. So in a sense, the Mishkan was the idea of giving tzedakah to support Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. Moshe Rabbeinu being an outstanding level of tzaddik, a high caliber of guarding the covenant. Fine. So this is another point that comes out of the parsha. We mentioned many things, but we should be zoche to hold on and not to feel embarrassed and shamed from where we've come from, our past, or what we're going through, but just the opposite, to take pride and glory that I'm coming from such a place, and yet I still want to be a good Jew. Like Rav Nosson writes to his son many, many times in the letters, Rav Nosson's letters, Alim the Trufa, the collected letters of Rav Nosson. He writes to his son, you should stop getting so overwhelmed by your bad thoughts that are trying to make you feel negative about yourself. Because just the opposite, you should say to yourself, if I am this bad as I'm thinking I am, so adraba, just opposite, that someone as low as me can touch the holy tefillin, can do Shabbat. If I am, okay, Yetzirah, you're trying to tell me that I'm low and that I should be ashamed and they've done terrible things, you just fall off already. Forget it. There's nothing worth holding on to. So I say just the opposite. Because I'm so far, so that now there's even greater value when I do a mitzvah, when I say a bracha, when I learn Torah, when I put on tefillin, tzitzit. Now it has much more value because I'm coming from where I am. This is the idea of the kumaz, that they weren't embarrassed to bring the kumaz, and it was accepted. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say anything about that, because here's the gold to rectify the gold of the golden calf. In other words, to activate the light of the Keter now, it's coming from places low, like the idea represented in the Chumaz. And B'ezrat Hashem, with that, every Jew has hope. We should be zoche to hold on to the tests we're going through now, especially now, before Mashiach comes, that the Jewish people have never, ever, ever, ever been so low. And yet, that is our pride. That even though we're so low and so far, and yet we want to come back to Hashem, this is the greatest pride and glory of Hashem, and the greatest light to allow us, and the greatest vessel to allow us to receive the light, infinite light of the Keter. Shabbat Shalom, and we be blessed.